Hi, everybody, and welcome back to the Wisdom Through Bitcoin podcast. I'm Chris Beauvais, your host. I'm here with Chris Coffey. He's a Bitcoiner I met on Bitcoin Twitter several months ago, and we've been following each other and have a lot of similar understandings of Bitcoin and a lot of perspectives on how we think the technology is going to benefit our generations and our families' generation as the years go by. So with that, I'd like to introduce Chris and have him give you kind of his background and his orange pill story to give you bigger context into some of the other talking points we're going to talk about. Go ahead, Chris.
Good for me. Okay. Yeah, so thanks, Chris. Thanks for asking me to do this. I'm really happy to do it. Um, so my intro to Bitcoin was I got introed by a shit coin.
Most of us
I'm okay
did.
to curse. I'm okay to curse, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay. Yeah, I got it. A friend of mine, Sean, I was trading stocks. I was trading stocks and I started getting into options and um, I just had a feeling just through the friends that we knew that he was involved in finance and stuff and so I went up to him and I said, "Let's I'm trading options and stuff, I wanted to ask you a couple of questions." And he just right away was like, "Fuck that shit." I said, "What?" He goes, "Crypto's where it's at. You're getting what, 50% return, 100%." He said, "How about 4,000% return?" I'm like, "All right, let's talk."
What year was this?
This was 2017.
Okay.
It was 2017, probably November, December-ish, right? With the mania. And but I was completely ignorant of Bitcoin. I maybe heard about something, but I mean, it was nothing that I had heard before. Like nothing. I guess I really hadn't heard of it. I should say that I hadn't heard of Bitcoin, crypto, any of it. One guy had talked to me about it about a month earlier, but everything he said went in one ear out the other. So anyway, so I said, "All right, talk to me, talk to me." So I said, "Yeah." So he said, "How do I, it was a whole thing. Like, how do I do it? Well, how do I get in? How do I, how do we do all this stuff?" And he started trying to run me through it. He said, "You got to open an account on Coinbase." So I opened an account on Coinbase and I said, "Okay, so tell me what, I basically was like an idiot. I'm like, just tell me what to do. Tell me what you're doing, because he told me he had started off with like 100,000. He was up to like over 1 million. And he'd already, so he turned his 100 grand into 1 million. And that got my attention. So I came in, like looking for some money. And so I opened an account on Coinbase. And what he did, he's like, "Well, I buy XLM, Stellar, and shit. Oh, and Litecoin and Ethereum. Those are his big three."
Mm-hmm.
Okay. So at that time in 2017, you couldn't get any of that on Coinbase. So I had to go to Kraken. So I had to I put $5,000 into Coinbase, bought $5,000 worth of Bitcoin, transferred the Bitcoin to Kraken. And you got to understand, I'm shitting my pants. I have no idea what this is, what the whole entire thing is about. And I'm putting money across, and I'm like, am I going to lose? Is my money just going to disappear? Like, it was so unfamiliar. And so then the money has to go to Kraken. The Bitcoin has to go to Kraken. And then I'm trying to figure out what that was in relation to everything else.
Now, couldn't you
I was
buy
lost.
couldn't you buy Bitcoin on Kraken?
Well, that was the thing. He started me off with um, Coinbase, and I said, "Well, where's the Stellar and the other stuff that you're talking about?" And he goes, "Oh, if you want to do that, you got to go on to Kraken." So I had to put the money, send the money, the Bitcoin to Kraken. And I think at the time you couldn't send. This might be it. My memory's a little shaky. I think at the time you couldn't send US dollars. You couldn't put US dollars on Kraken.
Yeah, there weren't really any stable coins at that time. I got involved in Bitcoin in about June or July of the same year. And
Oh, okay.
I started up with Coinbase as well. And honestly, I tried to open a Kraken account, but I couldn't get through their KYC, their Know Your Customer protocol. I tried two or three
Yeah.
times, and I was just like, forget it. I'm just gonna use Coinbase.
Yeah.
But a
It's
lot of the
amazing
different
how
pairings
different
that you're
everything.
talking about, I remember were very difficult to kind of understand how much it costs because everything it wasn't Stellar or Litecoin or Ethereum slash USD pairing, so you could get a dollar sense of what it was. It was in Bitcoin.
Right.
So you had to kind
It
of do
was
the
yeah.
calculation on the fly and be like, well, what am I paying for this thing?
Yes. Yeah. And so and having zero knowledge of that stuff, you're completely lost. And like, I mean, I was like, what the hell? But I would call him up and he kind of helped me out on it, tell me how to figure shit out. And I did it. And so anyway, I put the money in and I converted all the Bitcoin to Stellar. So it was like $5,000 Stellar. I opened up, I think that was like on a Thursday. I can't remember, something like that. And I think on a Monday or Tuesday next week, I opened the account and I've got 26 grand in the account from the 5,000. And that's it, man. I was like, I swear to God, I opened my computer, I looked at it, I'm sitting there and I'm like, and of course, I'm still confused because I'm not sure. And then I'm looking, I'm going, no, that's saying US dollars, $26,000. So
Yeah,
I turned to my wife.
at the time, did you
I'm
know that
sorry.
cryptocurrencies the exchanges are open 24/7, or did you think they were like closed on the weekend and you just didn't even work about it like a traditional
No,
exchange?
it just was a thing. Like I put it in and, I'll check up on it every once in a while. That was really all it was going to be. And so 5 days, 6 days later, I check up on it. It's at 26 grand. And I'm like, in my lifetime, I've never made 20 something grand in 5 days. It's never happened. I turned to my wife. She had a desk behind me, and I said, "Look at this." She looks at the numbers and she goes, "Nah, that's got to be some kind of mistake," because she knew I put $5,000 in. And I said, "You see what the number is, right?" She says, "Yeah." She says, "It's a mistake. It's got to be a mistake. There's no way you have $26,000 in 4 days." And I went back, and of course, I looked at the price of Stella. Then I looked at it, what happened, and I go, "Yeah, all right, I made fucking 20-something thousand dollars in 5 days." So I was hooked right there for the money, you know, and that's how I started. I shit coined and some other stuff. I wound up opening an account on Bittrex. Um, yeah, because I was so Kraken was so confusing and so weird. I was so freaked out like by using that site at that time. And again, zero knowledge of any of it.
Yeah, your story
So I
reminds me so
talked,
much of me because I did the same thing. I opened
yeah,
up an account on Bittrex and I was exchanging some other tokens at the time. But then I think Bittrex was they're a UK company and they shut down US customers or something
certain
like that.
states, certain states they wouldn't allow. New York was one of them for sure. But I live in Florida. Florida's free country, so Bittrex is allowed to operate here in Florida. So yeah, I went on to Bittrex and I went to his house. I'm like, Sean, you got to show me how to do all this, and you know. So anyway, he did, and I opened the Bittrex and I bought a bunch of other shit coins, Tron, and yeah, it was a full solid year from that of just bullshit shit coining, trying to get on Twitter and find out what and start to learn about what I was all involved in. And of course, 2 months later, everything was fucking tanking. And I'll keep going to Sean because Sean's my only resource, and I'm like, Sean, what's going on? And I don't know, don't worry, it's gonna go back up. It's gonna go back up. But Sean didn't know he didn't know Bitcoin. He only knew all of the crypto together, and he didn't know about the halvings, and he didn't really know what drove seemingly how stuff went up and down. So he kept saying, "Ah, I was going to turn around, I was going to turn around." So, well, shit, we were in 2019, and I'm like, get the, this is crazy. But I started learning more, and that's what I decided to do during all of 2018, all of 2019. I just was talking to people, listening to stuff, reading, bought some Bitcoin, some books, some material, and I started learning a little more, a little more, a little more every day. I had to take it in small doses. Then I started hearing about this halving thing, and so I started finding out, about the halving and how that sort of changes the perspective every 4 years. And yeah, so by 2019, I was done with all the other stuff, and I started going on Bitcoin only. That was it.
Was that mainly because of so I'm really interested in helping the audience kind of understand what your individual orange pilling story is. And for the audience, an orange pilling story is basically how you determined that Bitcoin was the only real digital currency, digital asset in the space, and all of the other altcoins, as they're referred to, in the Bitcoin, we refer to them as shit coins because they're basically Ponzi schemes in disguise that use a bunch of marketing terms in order to fleece people to give them their own money. And ultimately, there's no value behind each one of those currencies, which is really big in the media right now with the fallout of FTX and Celsius and Voyager and Lunaterra and XRP. And now with the
Yeah.
SEC really looking at changing some of the regulations on some of these tokens that are really unsecured securities that are unregistered securities that companies have been using to gain capital from people who are not traditionally known as what's the word? Someone who either
Legitimate.
makes $200,000 a year or has $1 million in capital. An accredited investor is the word I'm looking for. These are
Oh,
typically
okay.
people who can usually invest in these small startup companies, but through the cryptocurrency arena, you can do it through what a company will call an ICO, which was really big in the 2017, 2018 market that allowed all of these companies to fleece people out of their money, which ultimately ended up going to zero. So at that time, that
Yes.
was when many of us started doing the due diligence and really realizing what is the opportunity that's happening here. And as you go further and further down that educational road, we all tend to end up at Bitcoin. And that's the story I would really like to hear. So what were some of the books that you read? What were some of the influential people in the space at the time that really Saifedean's book, The Bitcoin Standard? It's the
I
Bible
read this book
of
and I was
crypto.
done. That was it. I was done with the shit coins. I read the book, and the truth is, I won't lie. I was financially illiterate my entire life. I didn't know anything about interest. I didn't know about stocks, nothing. I mean, what? I grew up poor in the Bronx in New York, working class, poor, working class. My dad drove cabs, worked construction, whatever he could get back in the 60s and 50s. And, you know, uh, so I never learned anything, and school never taught me anything about money. So I had no real education in how things worked. And so reading the Bitcoin Standard actually did a great thing for me, which it started to make me understand what money is. And then it started to make me understand how our financial system works. And so that was it. Really, my orange pill came from listening to people on Twitter, and then people kept talking about the Bitcoin Standard. And I bought the book and I read it, and I was like, okay, I get it now. I understand what you're talking about. And that was it. I was Bitcoin only from reading that book, and that was it. No more. Because, like you said, I didn't get involved in ICO. The closest thing I came to an ICO thing was I was following Pomp on Twitter, and he was talking about starting his company to do some, more crypto stuff. And he was getting his seed investors or whatever. So I tweeted to him and I said, "Can I get him in on your company?" And he said, "Are you an accredited investor?" I said, "No." And he said, "Sorry, it's only open to accredited investor." And I was like, "Oh, well, so you guys are saying, crypto or Bitcoin is for the little guy, to bank the unbanked and to get the people who have no way, to find a new way. And then when I want to join you, you're like, no, it's accredited investors only."
Yeah,
I know what an accredited investor is. I've had companies, I've had accredited investors, you know, give me money to start up and all that stuff. Um, but everybody was touting crypto as the new regime, the new everything. So I didn't get involved in any ICOs. I didn't get involved in any of those. All I did was buy some of those shit coins, and then I just eventually sold them all off to and put it in back into Bitcoin, and it's been in. I'm pretty much 100% Bitcoin. I have no money in the bank. I have no. Even the stocks I own, they
you
sold
know,
them all.
it's so interesting to hear you say that because my wife and I were in a very similar situation, and me growing up, both my parents were entrepreneurs, and we're middle class. I'd say middle class, upper middle class. Not really, we weren't really rich, but we had everything that we needed. And I always liked the idea of money, and I always liked the idea of sales and selling. I felt like that was how the economy worked, and that's what made the world go round. And I got my degree in finance from San Jose State, and I had
Oh,
some really great teachers, and I learned a lot. But the one thing they don't teach you about is money. And it wasn't really until 2017 when I read the Bitcoin Standard, and Saifedean does a great job of breaking that book down into really
yeah,
easy to understand bits of information. And it's not really until like the last 10% of the book that's really about Bitcoin at all. It's
yeah,
really kind of the
yes,
history of money and how societies
yes,
used money, and how technological advances broke down those current systems of monies within um, geopolitical areas. And then the next money was created, seashells to
right,
rocks to glass
right,
beads, which started the colonialism and slavery in around the world, to ultimate, to gold, to fiat currencies or the paper dollars that we know and use today, to the
yeah,
digital realm of most people don't even use physical dollars anymore. It's all digital. So, now what's big in the evolution of money is this idea of a central bank digital currency, which is ultimately a digital issued dollar or a digital issued
yeah,
currency from the country's central bank, with a lot more uh, oversight to it, or surveillance technology built into it, so they can see what you're spending your money on, how fast you're spending the money that you're given, are you paying all your taxes on that money, how is that money moving around the system, if it's issued to you in one state and then you're spending it in another state, is that a state you spend a lot of time in, or are you just on vacation there? And through a central bank digital currency, they can really focus on all that technology, and focus what your spending habits are. you know in California, it's a really big thing that we have to worry about here, because the government is always looking for more ways to tax you more and to take away more of your
yeah,
freedoms. So,
yeah. California is a fucking disaster. I wanted to move out there because I'm a beach person. I'm a surfer. I thought, and I got involved when I was in New York. I got involved in filmmaking and stuff, and I swore that I was going to live in California, and I'm so glad. I'm so glad that I never did, because now I'm living in Florida. And it kind of depends on who's running the show. Our governor is you know, he's anti all this other shit. That's anyway. Uh,
but where I
but
wanted to finish up
California,
with that is, we
yeah, yeah,
ultimately.
we'll get to that. We'll get back to that later. But yeah, I read Safety's book, and you're right. The end of it is really he talked about Bitcoin. But I got it. I started to get in, and that's where my education really kind of took off. I started reading more online, a lot of online articles, started listening to a lot more pure Bitcoiners as opposed to the guys that were just into everything. And I realized that that's when I kind of came to the conclusion, well, all those other cryptos are not actually decentralized. They're just they're cryptographic or whatever, but they're not decentralized. There's somebody who owns it, somebody who started the company, or a group of people, or they were financed by another group of people, and they run the protocol and they make all the decisions. I don't know if you ever paid any attention to Tron, but that guy makes me die laughing. He spent $3 million to get a lunch with Warren Buffett. You know, did you hear about that, Justin
No,
Sun?
no, but it frustrates me
Oh
because
God,
where did he
yeah.
get that $3 million from? He got it from
Yeah,
unsuspecting investors that bought the
that was
token, expecting that
exactly
they would
it.
get a return from it, and he's just going out and spending it on whatever he wants.
Yeah.
None of
So,
that
you know,
goes
I
into the
mean,
technology or the business.
right. Yeah, he just pulled and it wasn't the only thing. I saw him doing more stuff after I got rid of it all. And I actually start, you know, I'm terrible. I'll tweet at president. I'll say shit to anybody. So I was saying shit to him like, you know, instead of throwing all these millions of dollars on all this bullshit that you keep doing, why don't you send it back to your investors or buy back like they do with stocks? Buy back your own coin to give the coin more value so your investors or your people who bought your coin will actually benefit from it. I mean, who gives a shit if you're buying this guy's coin and he's throwing his money everywhere, you know? That guy was that Warren Buffett thing was kind of, you know, he was all, I won the Warren Buffett lunch. I paid 3 point something million dollars for it. Warren Buffett couldn't give two shits about that guy, about, and we all know his position on Bitcoin, rat poison squared and all that. But, you know, all those guys who are interwoven with the big business, corporate monopolies, government, I don't want I can't listen to them because everything they're saying is nothing that can benefit me. It's always going to benefit them. You know, like the cotillion effect and all that, however you say that word. Those guys, they're they have nothing to do with it. So a guy like Warren Buffett saying, or Charlie Munger saying it's garbage, it's rat poison, it's going to die. Well, of course, because you're invested in all this other system, the legacy financial system that we have. So why would you want something that's going to possibly replace it or make what you do less effective? So it makes total sense he would say something like
So,
that.
how would you explain to somebody the difference between like the fundamental, like the idea behind an altcoin or a shitcoin and Bitcoin from its creation points? Like, can you talk about some of the characteristics that Bitcoin has and how it was created compared
Right.
to how a lot of the altcoins were created?
Yeah, I mean, I have been doing believe me, I've been doing a lot of like recruitment, orange pilling and stuff with people. So one of the first things I tell them is that there's no one who runs Bitcoin. There's no one person who or one group that runs Bitcoin. It's an open source code, and you have miners and you have nodes, and all of those. And it, you know, I try to explain to them. They're all over the globe. They're all in different countries. They're everywhere, and every one of them has to sort of talk to each other and keep this network open and going. And so I tell them, if you're looking at one of the other ones, which I did before, you have a president or you have a board or you have whatever, and then they decide the issuance of it. They decide, you know, what's going on at Ethereum. We're going to change this. We're going to do that. And I also tell them, like, when they start their coin, they start with a pre-mine. They start with a bunch of it that's in their pocket. So I've heard people give the alternate argument online. Well, Satoshi has all those coins. You know, he started Bitcoin. He has all those coins.
Yeah, Satoshi has a
Yeah,
wallet full of 1 million coins that have never moved since the
right,
day he accumulated 1 million coins.
right.
And now he
So yeah, I
accumulates
mean
it.
that's a
It's
kind
a
of a
it,
bogus argument.
yeah. I don't want
You
to
know,
cut you off because I love your story, but I just want to help fill in some of the audience
right,
on the
sure,
finer nuances of that particular part. So when Satoshi Nakamoto, the creator of Bitcoin, created Bitcoin, he began running the protocol, and when he started running the protocol, he issued a statement on a cypherpunk news board that said, "Hey, I'm releasing this Bitcoin software. Here's the white paper. Go ahead and read it.
right,
And if you want to start running the software, here's how to do that." And
right,
at that point, he became able, or he with anybody else who read the paper and wanted to mine Bitcoin, they were able to do that alongside of Satoshi Nakamoto. So he never
right,
pre-mined anything. He never put himself at the front of the race or gave himself
right.
a leg up in the creation of Bitcoin. He really created something for the entire world. And he said, if it's going to work, it's going to work. Great. We all succeed together. Nobody's the CEO of this company. Nobody has the
Right.
total say on everything. It's an open protocol for the whole community.
And that's one of the things that really got me 100% towards Bitcoin because it is that. I feel like, someone like you or me or Michael Saylor or Max Kaiser,
Kaiser? Mm-hmm.
or anyone who's running a node or who's involved in the network, we're all the same as far as what how we are together. My say one Bitcoin is the same as Max's or yours or anyone down the road. Um, and I like that. I like the freedom. I like the decentralization because I mean we've seen what happened with the internet. The internet started and it was wide open, and then all of a sudden it started getting you get a good company and then it gets bought up by a bigger company, and then someone else comes up with a good idea and it gets bought up until you have a Google or you have a Facebook or you have a Twitter. You have these large, massive companies that kind of run everything. And I never liked any of that stuff. And I hated the idea of going online and the next thing I know, I go in my email and there's an ad for the thing I just searched for. That all that stuff just bugged the shit out. I'm not quite there in the privacy part with Bitcoin yet. I'm still using and transacting in KYC, know your customer. You know, Went online, bought it through an exchange. But my this year, my goals are to try the BISC network, the non KYC. The one I'm talking about, BISC.
Yeah.
Um,
Mm-hmm.
Also, I want to get start running a node. Get more involved in the network. Um, because I believe in what it is. I believe in Bitcoin, and so I want to be not just a Bitcoin owner of some of it. I want to be involved in the network because the network needs us to run, right? It needs. I mean, it both doesn't need me and does need me at the same time, right?
Yeah.
I mean, it
Yeah.
doesn't matter if I do if it doesn't matter if I buy it or don't buy it. It doesn't matter if I run a node or don't run a node. Um, but if I am doing those things, then I'm more involved in it, and it feels better to me to be connected to something like that where I feel connected to it, as opposed to stocks or buying stuff like that. Anything, you feel like, oh well, I'm just going to buy this stuff and hope it goes up. That's the end game, right?
Yeah.
Everybody's
Well,
always
and if you think about it, it's kind of how the traditional finance system has been educating us normal Joes on how we should invest our money, right? They're saying, no, 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 hire a financial advisor. Don't do any research yourself. We spend all of our time doing that. We've scoured tens of thousands, if not millions of companies over the course of our careers. And these are the ones that we recommend that you participate in and you buy shares of that. Back in the as long back as the early 90s, I believe it was, when you bought shares of a company, or even the early 2000s, when you bought shares in a company, in the mail, you'd get those physical shares sent to you. So you knew that
Oh
you
yeah,
had
yeah.
claim to the ownership of that business you were investing in. But then
Yeah.
all of a sudden that stopped. And, they talk a lot about the dark internet, but there's also a dark banking system that they don't talk about, which are these custodians that are behind the scenes that nobody knows the name of, that holds all of these security certificates for all of these companies that we all invest in. Like
Yeah.
if you use TD Ameritrade or Fidelity or
Yep.
Schwab, or any of those brokerages, the brokerage doesn't even hold that security that you're buying through their platform. It goes to another dark bank that holds the custody of that certificate for the benefit of Schwab, and then Schwab or whatever brokerage holds that value for the benefit of the customer, which is you. So we're
Ah,
actually three parties removed from the physical ownership of these things. And so
yeah.
when you go, back up until maybe 7 years ago, most platforms charged a commission for trading on their through their brokerage. So you'd
Right.
pay, it used to be $13, then it went down to $9, then $7, then $3, and then it was free. And you're like,
Zero.
okay, well, if it's free, if the money I'm spending is going from me to buy that share, and I can buy and sell it at no cost other than paying the small spread of that share, you think, how is the brokerage making any money?
Right.
And they're making your money because they're rehypothecating behind the scenes the ownership rights that you actually have. They're taking onto that ownership right and they're lending it out to other people for yield. And then those people they're lending it out to pay them back what the value is plus a little bit more. And then that's the commission that we used to just pay outright for buying and selling the stock. Now they're doing that. So it's like, so one of the best things about Bitcoin and what makes a lot of people gold bugs is the ownership of it, holding the physical custody of it.
Yes.
And so I don't know if you want to talk about this, but I'd really enjoy the conversation of your
Sure.
understanding of self custody and how Bitcoin really hates using leverage and how it seems to destroy anybody who tries to rehypothecate it, because ownership in Bitcoin is the most important thing. And the way you
Yep.
verify ownership in Bitcoin is through what's called a node that you've talked about, and you definitely should run one. It's kind of like the
Yeah.
accountant for the Bitcoin network. At any time, if you run a node, you can dial into the software and you can verify any transaction in any wallet, any amount of physical Bitcoin in there. So you can actually show physical ownership.
Yeah. Yeah. That's been one of the things where I've had. I mean, I talk to people my age and older and younger, and always the people my age and older are always like, I can't hold it. I can't hold it. So, we get into this because I have a friend, and this is crazy, but I've been talking to her about Bitcoin. She's probably close to 70. And she told me she keeps 25,000 to, I don't know, maybe around that 25,000 in cash in her house because she
Wow.
doesn't want it in the bank. She don't want it in the bank. She don't want anybody knowing that where that money is and nothing. And I'm like, holy shit. Fire, a break in, energy 20, but so her big thing to me was always, I can't hold it. Like I took my money, from my job, I cashed my check, or I saved up and I took the cash and I put it in a box or whatever. And I always know if I go look in the box, I can get the box. And so I think that's one of the things talking to people my age that's hard to get across. And because they can't grasp something they can't get their hands on. And so I go back to the regular financial system and I said, well, everything now you deal with is online, right? I mean, you use a card, either you use a card for everything or you're online and all your money. And I ask them, how do you know how much money you have in your bank account? I go online, I look at my account. I say, okay, so your money is there, you see it there, but you're not holding it. And so they're like, okay, so I start to get them that way. So you can see the money there, you can verify it's there, but you don't actually hold it in your hands. And if you want to spend it, you can, right? And they say yes. I say, okay, so it's a very similar thing. Your money, your Bitcoin is there, and when you spend it, you see the transaction. You send it to whoever. And so they're starting to go, okay, I'm getting it a little bit. And it is kind of, it's one of the things I really feel like
Yeah.
that maybe needs we need more of in the Bitcoin community is an ease of use.
Hmm.
An ease
Yeah,
of use
Bernie Madoff would send
for
you an
the
account statement every single month that would tell you how much money you had in your account, but the money was never really
Madoff,
there, was it?
Madoff.
Yeah, and so,
Yeah,
that's one of the great things about these nodes is you could actually verify. You don't, in the real, in traditional finance, they
right.
say trust but verify. In Bitcoin, we
Yeah,
say don't trust, verify.
don't trust. Yeah,
Because, and most recently with the fallout of FTX, it turns out as they're doing the forensic accounting that a lot of the assets that they said were on the platform form were never actually there. I think they were short like what 8,000 Bitcoin or something like that they never even actually owned. But when the customer dialed into their online portal, they look at the balance and they'd say, okay, I have X amount of
okay.
Bitcoin, I have X amount of
Right,
this, but it was never really
right,
there. So,
right.
in a similar sense with a bank, which I'd love to hear more about your friend who holds all of this cash. Like, what's the genesis of that fear that she has about holding cash in the bank? Why doesn't she trust
Well,
the bank?
yeah, it's because again, my parents grew up in Depression era. Her parents definitely were Depression people, and they understand that if you have money in the bank and the bank closes, there's
No
nothing you
money.
can do. You know, I mean, I'm old enough to remember before I was working and we didn't have ATM. So if you got paid with a check on a Friday, you brought it to the bank, and then you didn't, if you had no money in your account, they would say, okay, you could deposit it, but you couldn't cash it. So you would put the money in and you would be fucked. You wouldn't be able to get your money until they allowed that check to clear.
Mm-hmm.
And it even happened to me with a government check. I went to the bank with I think it was a refund from tax. And I said, I want to cash this. And they said, you don't have enough in your account. And I said, well, it's a federal check from the IRS. So it doesn't matter. You don't have enough in your account.
Why is your account even part of the equation? You're not cashing your money, you're cashing the government's money.
That's what I was saying to them. And I'm telling you, this was in 80 or 81, somewhere around there. And they were like, no, you can put it in in your account and the check will clear in a couple of days and you can get to the money. And I remember thinking at the time, I was like, holy shit, this is crazy. And that's what brought up all of those check cashing places. All those check cashing places were exactly because of that. Because poor people or people like myself, working paycheck to paycheck, you need that money on Friday or you need that money that week or whatever that weekend. Well, he couldn't do it. So that's the idea. And I know it because I used to do it and my parents did it. They stashed money in strong boxes and shit in the house. Because of that. They were like, this is in case of an emergency, a big emergency, you know? And that's the way she feels. She feels like these fucking banks could, she doesn't trust the government, she doesn't trust the banks, but she's kind of stuck. And so she felt like, well, I'm gonna keep the money in my house in a box. So in case the banks close and they don't want to give me whatever weird thing happens, that she'll have access to at least that much money. And that's her thinking. And I understand it because that's kind of how we grew up back then. You had to stash some money on the side because I don't know anybody really trusts the bank, do they?
So how would you say Bitcoin overcomes that challenge with someone keeping you from getting access to what's yours?
Right. So, well, my ideas and what I try to explain to people is open up a wallet, put some Bitcoin in there, and then use it or cash it out or do whatever you want to do, and see if you ever have any problems. And so far, nothing. You know how it works. If you want to move your Bitcoin, you move your Bitcoin, and nobody could do anything about it.
I have a really interesting story about that. So when our first child was born, we had a nanny come in because in California you have to have two incomes in order to really live here, and so
Yeah,
someone had to watch our kid. And the lady that we had come and watch him was 62 years old at the time, and she watched him for a couple of years. And she's from Ukraine, and she has a daughter and two grandkids who were living in Kiev. And when the Ukrainian war started, she just happened to be over at our house because we've kept in contact with her, and she was over for dinner, and we were talking. And my wife and I are really big into Bitcoin. So we were saying, what is your daughter going to do? And she said that they were driving to the border and they were going to try to get across while they still could. And we were hearing all sorts of stories about banks closing and not being able to get gas, and credit card networks not working. And
right.
we started to tell her about Bitcoin and how it could be used if need be as a safety net, as an insurance policy, that they could spend the Bitcoin and get what they needed and they wouldn't have to worry about any of the banking system. So that really intrigued her, and we helped her set up a Moon wallet, the MUUN wallet,
Yeah, I have
which
one.
is it's an app that you can get on your cell phone, whether it's from the Google Store or the Apple Store. You download it on your phone, you go through some very simple startup process, and then you can have people send you Bitcoin. And so we sent her a little bit of money in Bitcoin, and from our phone to her phone. So she saw how quickly it worked right then and there, and she was like, "Oh, okay. Well, how do I get more of this?" And
Yeah,
so we helped her set up an account on Strike, which is a Bitcoin only exchange that is very reputable and doesn't. They have all sorts of custody in place, so you don't have to worry about whether or not the Bitcoin's actually there. But so then we had her buy the Bitcoin on Strike and then immediately send it to her Moon wallet. And then since she had that knowledge, she could talk to her daughter in Ukraine and have her set up a wallet too and send her the money there. So if she needed anything to get across the border, she had access to it, because you never know if you think you have something and then you don't, right? Or you
yeah,
think you have a plan A and a plan B, and then none of those pan out and you need a plan C.
yeah.
So
That's how I build another friend of mine. I have a friend Charlie, him and another guy Tony. We get together a bunch, and almost every time we get together for lunch, I talk about Bitcoin constantly. And so Charlie decided he went on an exchange. He went on Coinbase and he bought some Bitcoin finally. I think it was 2 years ago. And Charlie does a lot of I don't know. He knows a lot of people. He meets a lot of people online. He's a lawyer, and he knew someone in Russia. He had friends in Russia. He had friends in Ukraine. And he calls me up one day and he says, "Chris, I gotta send money to my friends in Russia and Ukraine." And I said, "Okay." So we did almost the exact same thing. He had already had his Coinbase account. We got him the Moon wallet, and he put the Bitcoin in the Moon wallet, and it was really cool. And I told him, I said, just have her text you a QR code, or you know, and she texted him the QR code, and he just used it right through the text, which I didn't even realize. I was kind of like half-assing it. I was like, I'm pretty sure that'll work. And she texted him her QR code from her wallet, and he just used his phone and he sent her the money. So he sent money to people in Russia. And well, you know what happened. We all know what happened. When Russia invaded Ukraine, the United States said, both you're cut off.
Mhm.
The banking, everything, you're cut. So they sanctioned Russia. Well, you have people on the ground in Russia and like places in Africa and South America who are, what am I supposed to do? I'm not in the tank. I didn't start this war, and now I have to suffer, you know? And so my friend, he's been sending money to Russia. It's like, and he goes, I said, see, Charlie, this is what I've been trying to tell you for 2.5 years, that you can't do anything about this. This is freedom money, which I tell people, this is money for people who want freedom. And I said, Russia invaded Ukraine. United States said, that's it. Everyone's cut off. You're fucked. And I said, what did you do? You called me. How do I send Bitcoin to my friend? We did it. And he did it. He did the QR code. He said she called him up 2 minutes later. She had it.
Yeah.
And he said, all the time you were telling me about Bitcoin, I had no idea it could do something like that. And I said, you see, that's why I get passionate, because I've heard the stories of people in South America and Africa and all that who have no, we're fucking privileged in America. I'll criticize the government all day long, but there's people who are in dire straits, and they need this. This is what they need more than even what we need.
Hmm.
We're part of the movement, but I heard the girl's story from Africa, those 14 countries in Africa that are all controlled by France. That's crazy. They
Hey, did you hear
the
this? Did,
money's no good anywhere in the world, so they're using Bitcoin, and down there they're getting freedom from the oppression that they've been suffering at the hands of governments, and that's the shit that gets me really excited about Bitcoin.
yeah, I
You
think
know,
one great distinction in Bitcoin that we've been in it about the same amount of time, and we've done a lot of the
yeah,
same research and learning. And I think it's so great that in Bitcoin, we can come from different parts of the world, different backgrounds, different challenges in our own life. And yet we all come to Bitcoin in sort of the same way and have this, bond that's created through this mutual understanding of money. And one of the things I love about Bitcoin is a lot of people think, well, okay, well, I have Bitcoin. What am I going to do with it? Like, how would I use this? And what they haven't realized yet is you don't need to really do anything with Bitcoin. All it is, it's an open network. It's a payment system. It's a peer to peer, two people like you and
yeah,
I, Chris, can send money back and forth to one another without having some third party interjecting on whether or not we're
right,
making an invalid transaction or we're breaking
right,
some kind of law. Like if you have a coffee cup, like, hey, I see a shirt there hanging on your door. I like that shirt. I want to buy that shirt from you. I don't have to go to my Venmo and have a bank tell me whether or not I can buy that shirt from you. I take cash, I turn it into Bitcoin, I send it to you. You receive the Bitcoin, you immediately turn that Bitcoin back into cash, and you send me the shirt. So
right.
you can use Bitcoin as just a transactional rail, just to send value from point A to point B. You don't ever actually need to have Bitcoin. The thing that makes
Right.
Bitcoin special is as more and more people realize this and understand that they can send value from point A to point B over the network, the demand for this service will grow, which means that the demand on these Bitcoin, which there'll only ever be 21 million Bitcoin in existence, and there
Right.
are now over 8 billion people on the planet. So
Yeah.
you have to count to 21 million a lot of times before you get to 8 billion. So as everybody
Exactly.
starts using this network, of course the supply will stay the same, but the demand will grow, which means the price will go up over time, which is
Right.
kind of the number go up technology or the investment thesis, so early in the game that we're at right now.
Yeah. I mean, basically, yeah. I mean, that's a lot of what I talk to people about is I don't look at, because again, I got in the same way. And a lot of people come at me the same way. And they're like, well, I don't, if I buy Bitcoin, hasn't it gone down and it's, the price and all that? And I say, well, you have to look at it a little bit different. If you're looking at it to just buy it and then wait for it to hit the top and then sell it for money again, just go buy some stocks. You know, I really do. I say, just go buy a house, buy an income property. I said, if that's the only reason you're involved, you want to be involved in Bitcoin, which a lot of people do, but we all have to start somewhere. But I tell them, it's savings over time, and it's a form of, like you said, peer to peer. I can send to you, I can send it to someone in Russia, China, South America, wherever, without asking anyone else's permission to do it, just doing it. Which is one of the things that got me very big on Bitcoin. Also, was I heard this girl's story who was a cam girl. She was a cam girl, she's making money from her customers. I don't give a shit. I'm not judging you. She said that PayPal shut her down. And their reasoning was your business doesn't fit our code of ethics. You're a fucking payment system. What code of ethics do you have?
Yeah.
You're going to declare I can't use your service because you don't, and that was it. You don't like what I'm doing. And that's a PayPal. That's not even the government. That's just a fucking company, a
Hmm.
payment system. And when people ask me about why Bitcoin, I said, well, look, and they do that. They say, well, I could use PayPal. I could send money to people with PayPal. And I said, yeah, well, do something that PayPal doesn't like, and they'll fucking shut you down. Nobody can shut your Bitcoin down. They start to see it a little bit differently that way. But that's, again, what really gets me fired up is that the non asking for permission, the freedom money, the ability to save money in a non, excuse me, it's, where our currency, the value is going down and down and down and down. Yeah, you need two people to work everywhere in America. Back, 50, 60 years ago, one person could work. And, how much could you buy with $1 back then? How much can you buy with $1 now? Which I never understood. And I just used money the same way everybody does. I go to work, I get paid, I buy what I need. I never thought about it. And a lot of time that's the backlash I get. I don't want to think about it. Bitcoin is a lot to, as you know, 5 fucking years later, I'm still trying to learn
Yeah.
how to use this technology, how it works, all this stuff. And I find that most people don't want to know that. See, I like to learn. I like to find new stuff, and most people don't want to. They just want something that either is going to make them money or is easy.
So how old
So
were
that's why I
you?
say for us,
How old were you when you first started thinking about retiring one day? And then how old were you when you actually started like planning and putting away money to do it?
2017 was really the first time. I've always been like an entrepreneur. I've always been in my own businesses, or I'm all over the place. Um, so I never really thought about it. But in 2017, I started thinking, like, shit, man, in a few years, I'm going to be 60. I said, I have to start thinking about ways of having money for retirement. My wife has our 401k and stuff like that. And she still works, and we both work. Same thing. We both have to work. And um, yeah, so I was like, this is it's my own problem, like I never learned about saving, I never learned about money, I never learned about investing. So all I ever knew my whole life was go to work, make money, pay your bills, start all over. And the idea of saving for retirement and all of that, I always looked at that as, I'll get to that someday. I'll get to that
Yeah, it's kind of like
and I'm like,
hustle as long as you can, as hard as you can, and hopefully when you're done
yeah,
hustling, you have enough to relax, right?
yeah. So, I mean, I really look at Bitcoin as, and my Bitcoin investment as just my money for the future. I'm just putting this money away for, 10 years. And same thing with my grandkids. I mean, my grandkids have Bitcoin wallets. They have Casa, but we're going to try to move them. We're going to try to move them out of there.
Good planning, especially now after
I
what's
mean, I'm
happened with them the
sorry.
last
I
couple of
mean, I
weeks.
don't want to bag on the guy, but like, I'm not going to support companies or people who are involved in the other stuff. Because if you've been around for 5 years, most of these guys who are running these companies, they were into Bitcoin before we were.
Hmm.
I love Jack Mallers. He's a young kid with a lot of, and he's Bitcoin on. Look, and I wish I had that kind of the way he can just talk about Bitcoin and make you really get like pumped up and understand what he's saying. Me, I'll go all over the fucking place, and my thoughts are all over the place. But he's very focused and very so I like that. I like his company. I like his
Yeah,
MO,
it's why I
what he
use
does.
Strike, and why my wife
Yeah,
uses Strike is because we like him, and he's a young guy, but he must have some really wise people around him, because his
yeah,
education on the subject of money and remittance payments and cross border transactions and whatever, it's just like
yeah.
it's he's in a
And he
completely
has
different
that. He
league.
has that script nailed, man. He gets on like CNBC and he hammers that shit home, and the people are like, "Okay, thanks," and they're always glad that they had him on.
Yeah.
But I like Strike, and I like him, and I wish I could really explain it as well as he does. Um, but yeah, most people my age are in better shape than I, as far as money wise. I've always been kind of a fly by seat of my pants type of guy, you know. Um, like
So okay,
right now.
so we've been going here for almost an hour. I don't want to. I want to
Oh
be
yeah,
courteous
okay,
to your time. I know time has really flown here, but
it's all
I
right.
did kind of want to follow up on you're saving in Bitcoin now. Can you talk a little bit about how even with the volatility, how the Bitcoin seems to be accumulating, or how the Satoshis seem to be accumulating? And I don't
Well,
never tell anybody how much Bitcoin you have or anything.
right.
So no
No,
dollar
no, I have
values.
no,
But
never gonna happen.
just
And
from your
I will admit, I have sold some.
from your initial perspective on how long you thought it was going to take you to like how it's actually going. Is it falling in line with your thesis, or are you surprised or in a positive way, or shocked that it's not growing as quickly as you thought?
Well, I changed my ideas as the time has passed, and now, you know, and again, most of this shit comes from Twitter, or listening to guys like that, guys who are Bitcoin. Anyway, I use Swan right now. I I can I don't I feel comfortable saying it. I put $100 a week. I purchase $100 worth of Bitcoin every week. I think it's on a Sunday. So whatever day, it's a Sunday. Whatever the price is that day, they buy. Swan takes it out of my bank account and they buy me $100 worth every week. So that's what I'm doing now. That's where I'm at. At the beginning, it was just buy as much as I could, you know, and then I wound up selling it, and it was like I was kind of all over the place. So now my focus is more what they call, I guess, DCA, um, dollar cost averaging. So if you're buying at this price or buying at this price, it balances out. So yeah, I started kind of going on that idea, and the idea was, okay, I have some Bitcoin. I have my Bitcoin. I have Bitcoin that I've given to my family, my grandkids, my children. Um, and so I started doing the Swan, and now Fold. I use a Fold card too.
Oh, I love the full
I
card.
pay my
Use it every
I
day.
pay my HOA. I pay my grocery bills $1,000 a month. So my groceries. are sending me back Bitcoin. They're sending me back Satoshis. And it doesn't matter what the value is today. It matters to me 10 years from now. So I'm looking at it like that. So I'm piling up $100 a week in buys, and I'm piling up whatever rewards I get back from my Fold card. In case anybody doesn't know, it's just like a credit card. You have to fund it through your bank, and it's spending dollars. So you go to the store, wherever bill you're going to pay, it's going to pay them in dollars. And then they have a thing where you spin the wheel. People think it's hokey, but whatever. And it tells you how much percentage they're going to give you back in Bitcoin or Satoshis. Because you'll never, so I pay my HOA, I pay my insurance, I pay everything I can possibly pay with Fold and get my rewards in Bitcoin. That's the one less thing I have to, buy more Bitcoin. So I get it back in that. And so my moving forward is just really that. It's just buying in increments or using stuff that's going to give me Bitcoin back somehow.
Uh-huh. So you're wearing a shirt that's very well known in the Bitcoin space called Unchained
Yeah,
Capital.
yeah, because the
What's your story with them?
what the back says, right?
What does it say? We can't read it here.
Friends
Friends.
don't let friends sell Bitcoin. Friends don't let friends sell their Bitcoin. Yeah, so I use them for the vault, and I've taken out some loans from them. It's really easy. They're really easy to work with. And again, I saw them at Bitcoin 2021 in Miami. Talked to Parker, talked to a couple of other guys there, and I thought it was really good. And like you said before, no rehab hypothecating the Bitcoin.
Yeah, no double
So
spending the money.
right, you're right, no double. So as opposed to FTX, if you put your money in a vault, you put your Bitcoin in a vault and Unchained, you have a key, they have a key, multi-sig wallet, vaults and wallets. So you still have control of your Bitcoin. It's not like an exchange where you buy Bitcoin and it says you have, say 1.2 Bitcoin. Well, as we know in FTX, it can say that all day long. And then when the company goes and they say, see you later, you don't have 1.2 Bitcoin because you never had any keys. You never had any control over it unless you pulled it out fast. So yeah, you can buy Bitcoin on an exchange, but get it off immediately. I didn't do that before, but now I do.
Did you ever lose any
And that
Bitcoin?
No, I've sold some. I've sold some over time because again, like I said, everything. Oh, I'm all in on Bitcoin.
I love it. I love
Like,
it how
oh
you
shit,
related losing Bitcoin to selling Bitcoin. It's such a common, mindset that we have. When my wife and I, we went to El Salvador this last year with our family, our
yeah,
5-year-old and our 2-year-old for a vacation, and had a wonderful time there. And we spent a lot of Bitcoin down there, well, just because it's legal tender down there. We
yeah,
wanted to use the network. We wanted to see how it would work in a Bitcoin world,
yeah.
if this could really be used as a
And how
viable
did that work
option.
out for you?
And what we found ourselves doing is every time we spent our Bitcoin, we would immediately buy it back.
Get some more. Yeah,
So
yeah,
we could have used cash, but we used the Bitcoin and then we just bought it back.
yeah. But that's a great thing because we want to have a network and we want to have a community that's using, a thing that's being used. And I agree with the idea to stack sats and stay humble and stack sats. I agree with that, but we're not going to get Bitcoin to the place we all want it to be if we don't spend it. We have to spend it, right?
We got to
We
use the
have to
network.
use it.
Yeah.
If you don't use it, then everybody's going to grab it, throw it in a vault or on a wallet, and no one. And then where's all the Bitcoin going? So how do we get the circular economy? How do we get the world to use Bitcoin if we're all just going to grab it and keep it? It doesn't make much sense to me. So yeah, spending it is a different to me. Spending it is a little different than selling it.
Yeah,
And for me,
sure.
selling is like I bought, 5 Bitcoin and I'm like, holy shit, I gotta buy a car and I don't have any money in my fucking bank account. So now I gotta sell, 1 Bitcoin and go back and buy a car. That's kind of what I meant by selling it. No, I never lost any as far as like being on an exchange, and I didn't get involved in that. If people are calling me for days, were you involved in that FTX shit? I'm like, no, no. If I buy on an exchange, it was, and I don't anymore. I use Coinbase. Coinbase is done. Even Bitrix, I don't use anymore. I keep the account open in case I need to cash out, but I use my Swan. Um,
Yeah, and so with your Swan, is it automatically set up? I know they have a service where you buy the hundred
yeah,
dollars in Bitcoin and it automatically sweeps into your private custody wallet. Or do you let it accumulate and then send it over?
no, I have they have it in that Prime Trust is
Hmm.
their Prime Trust is their custodian.
Yeah, it's a very common
So there's
custodian
it's
with
still
Bitcoin only
not,
companies.
yeah. Yeah, I mean their Prime Trust is Bitcoin only, right? And they're very well known. They're not exactly fly by night. So I feel comfortable with it in there, but I still take it out. I mean, I take it out and I put it in my own wallets. I don't I don't as much as I like Swan and everything, I still am more getting to the point where everybody says custody your own Bitcoin, custody your own.
Yeah.
Even though Unchained, I'm comfortable with them. I'm comfortable with Swan, comfortable with Strike. Um, but I want it in my own wallet anyway. I want to have my own access. I
Yeah.
do use all of them. So I have a little bit of each. Let's put it that way.
Yeah, us early adopters, people say, "Well, I'm too late for Bitcoin," and the reality is, we're just getting started. Um, if this thing has the
Yeah.
value like the internet, think about the internet back in 1975 to 1985 to 1995, the leaps and bounds in technology and new companies building on top of the base
Oh
layer,
yeah.
which is just the internet, if you will. Um, really escalates and grows, and the value grows on top of that. One of the things I love about Unchained Capital, not to do a selfless plug for them, I don't get paid by Unchained. Other than
Yeah, me
using their
neither.
services and following them, there's no monetary compensation. But one of the biggest questions in Bitcoin that stops people from getting in the space, especially people who are a little bit later in life, is the fear of loss, of putting their money into this thing and then
Right.
they lose their hardware wallet, which is basically a USB drive you plug into your computer that holds your internet, holds your Bitcoin, but it's
Yeah.
held off the internet, so there's no way for somebody to hack into that, or it gets dropped in a sink, it gets burned, it gets crushed in your house falls down or something like that. Now, how do you get
Yeah.
access to your Bitcoin? So
Yeah.
Unchained has answered that question by what they do is called three. It's a three-party authentication, um,
Yeah.
and or trip. What's the actual? It's was it
The multi-sig?
multi-sig? That's the word I'm looking for. So
Yeah.
they'll do a 2 or 3 multi-sig. So
Yeah.
they'll set your account up with, instead of one hardware wallet, they attach 3 hardware wallets to it,
Right.
and they hold one hardware wallet and you hold the other 2. That
Right.
way, if something should happen to one of the wallets, you still have access of ownership to your Bitcoin. So
Right.
if you get hit in the head and you forget your password or something like that, you can still have access to your Bitcoin. And that's one of the fundamental things that Bitcoin needed early on in its days, is a way to answer that question. And Unchained has done a great job in solving that for the average person. Before, you used to have to be a computer software engineer to know how
Yeah.
to set that kind of system up. And Unchained will walk you through the whole process, and there's a white glove concierge service, and really help set you up. So as you're doing
Yes.
dollar cost averaging in the future, you can kind of do it in the background and not have to worry about, am I going to lose this thing?
Yeah, but I mean, I've spoken to people who work at both companies. As I use them, and that's me too. Like I recommend these companies because I use them and I believe in them, and they're Bitcoin only companies. I don't get any money from it, but I don't have a problem recommending them to people if I feel like, I've used them and I feel comfortable with it. Some of the things that I think that what we were talking about is that, you need that, especially for older people. You need, because the verbiage, a UXTO and all the language that has to do with Bitcoin, addresses and seeds and signing. And when you start telling people, they're like, oh, I can't. So we need something that's simple like that. You can bring it to them and they can the hardware wallets is still a little bit difficult though for people.
Yeah.
I don't know.
Mhm. It's one of the reasons
You
why
know,
in the book that my wife and I wrote, Bitcoin for Kiddos, which is a book focused towards children and helping basically kids learn about Bitcoin and then orange pilling their parents through it, is in the back of it. There's a
yeah,
glossary of commonly used Bitcoin terms because we
yeah,
felt the same way that people needed to not necessarily understand why Bitcoin was created, but also understand the lingo involved in getting your feet wet in the space. And once you know it,
yeah,
it's like anything else. It becomes like riding a bike. You never forget it. You never forget it. It becomes easy to talk
right.
about, or even if you don't talk about it, you're at least you understand the concepts of it. But it's that first move, just to take the step and to have a friend of yours who's into Bitcoin help you set up your first exchange account, help you set up your first wallet, and create your first
Yeah,
transaction. And once you do that, it just is like, oh, this isn't as hard as I thought it was going to be, and you're kind of off
yeah,
and running.
yeah. You just have to get comfortable with it. I mean, I feel pretty good. I'm saying right now in the last like 2.5, 3 years, I probably got about 25 people, maybe a couple more set up with Bitcoin. Whereas before, we were just talking about it. Now they've
Mhm.
actually gone, taken the next step and got a wallet, bought some Bitcoin. They have it, and I'm teaching my grandson. I'm teaching him, showing him, here, this is, take the phone, see that? That's you know what that is? He says, yeah, it's a QR code. Right. Okay. So now I want to send you this much. And I show him, he hits it, and I say, see, now it's in your account. Oh, okay.
That's super
He's
cool.
8 years old. Hey, that's the
Super
future. And
cool.
that my one grandson, he used to sit on my lap and I'd be on my computer and I'd be, buying and doing all this stuff and trading. And he'd say, the red means we're losing money, right? And the green means we're making money. When I used to trade, I did that too in the beginning. I traded Bitcoin, like I tried trading all the time. No more. I'm using it as a savings vehicle.
Perfect.
I'm not going to try to be a trader. I'm not a good trader.
Yeah, neither am I.
But
That's why I don't
anyway,
trade Bitcoin either. All right. So I wanted to get into a little bit more of a fun part of this interview that I've
okay,
tokened the lightning round. And in the
okay,
lightning round, I'm going to ask you 5 questions. If you don't know the answers to them, that's fine. The idea is just to be a little bit more educational in nature and help people kind of understand some of the maybe the nuances or
okay,
some of the technology in Bitcoin. So
okay,
if you're ready, so just I'll ask you the question, and then just as quickly as you can, try to shout out an answer, and then we'll go
okay,
over the answers at the end of it. All right.
okay.
All right. Here we go.
Go.
Question one. What year was Bitcoin released to the world?
2008.
All right. What is a Satoshi?
It's a denominated unit of account of a Bitcoin. It's broken down into Satoshis,
All right.
like a dollar broken down into pennies.
Question three. How many sats equal $1 currently?
How many? I can't, I'm never going to be able to figure that out. I
Okay.
don't know.
Question four. Is it possible to invest in Bitcoin within your 401k or IRA?
Yes.
All right. And what is your favorite Bitcoin product or service?
My favorite Bitcoin product or service. I'd say right now I'm liking the Fold card because the Fold card I'm using as a I used my debit card for a million years. I never got anything. Now I'm getting stuff back. And Fold has just opened up. You can purchase Bitcoin through Fold.
Yeah.
And they're offering right now, at least they're offering zero fees. So I'm gonna try. I haven't done it yet, but I'm uh they're in beta, I think, but it's still. But I'm on it, and it shows a little B on your phone, and so I'm gonna use that. Yeah, I like Fold.
Yeah,
I like them,
I love
and
them too.
I'll
I'll put a link to Fold
yeah, that going.
in the show notes too. So anybody who sees it who wants to check Fold out, definitely do it. I think they give you 5,000 sats, or in some cases if they're running promotions,
Yeah,
it's like 20,000 sats just for signing up.
yes, yeah, and they have referral stuff, and I've referred a bunch of people on there. Same thing. I love that. If you're giving me incentive, then I'm definitely going to refer your product if it's good, not just for that,
Yeah.
but if I use it and I like it. So I've got a bunch of people on to Fold and my wife and all that. But so now I'm going to try to start. I'll get to the non KYC Bitcoin down. This year sometime next year, 2023, when I get the node and all that stuff working. But yeah, I like I like Fold. Um, but the one thing I do want to plug is the thing I want to talk about while we have a couple minutes left. I know we've been going on. Um, is the Ross Ulbricht thing. Um, it,
Help people
it
understand
I
who's
heard
Ross Ulbricht.
Ross Ulbricht was the and he's the guy who started the Silk Road, where they did the online. They sold illegal drugs. We all know, this whole fucking world knows, the war on drugs is a joke. The war on drugs are winning. Um, Bottom line was he got caught, right? There was people were selling. But the thing, what I thought about it was a great idea because I grew up in the streets of the Bronx. So let's just say I have a familiarity in dealing with drugs in the street. It's a dangerous fucking business. And that was just, in my area, never mind on a large scale. So they put a thing online and people can transact and buy the stuff. I believe in your own sovereignty. If I want to put drugs in my system, it's my fucking business. But, anyway, so he started the Silk Road. He got, it got to blew up on the dark web, and he got caught. He got caught and he got fucking railroaded. And I've heard about the trial. The trial was supposedly a joke. Um, and in the end, they sentenced this guy who had never been convicted, had never been caught doing anything illegal in his entire life. They sentenced him to double life plus 40 years. I can't even comprehend how someone could make that decision and feel okay with themselves.
Yeah, they could
Now, I know it
connect.
had a lot.
They could connect no deaths, no crimes,
No,
no
no,
violent
no deaths,
acts,
no
according to
violence,
anything that was
nothing.
sold on his
Right,
platform. And
right.
he got,
And so the
yeah,
the and I just had a debate with a guy on Twitter. He said, "Well, he did it. That's his problem. He rolled the dice." And I said, "No, no. So they said, I said, double life plus 40 years. Do you understand what that is? That's for mass murder.
mhm.
That's not for a guy who's never been in trouble in his life, who didn't harm anyone, and only, was facilitating this thing. The guy said they wanted to make an example. I said, making an example is not a reason to give somebody that sentence, as far as I know, in our laws.
Yeah, I mean,
But El
in that
Chapo,
sense,
right?
drugs are still being sold on the street. People are still using physical cash to money launder and do all sorts of unscrupulous
Yeah,
activities out in public. People are forced to carry an immense amount of wealth on their persons, which puts them in harm way from a security standpoint. Murders are still happening in the streets,
right.
and people are getting smaller
Yeah.
sentences for getting caught that way.
Well, they restarted the Silk Road after Ross was caught, right? And then they got the guy who did the second Silk Road. Well, he's already out of jail. And I
Ridiculous.
look at that.
I
El
think Ross was
Chapo.
what, 29
El
years old?
Chapo. Yeah, he's in his 20s. El Chapo got life plus 30 years. El Chapo.
Hmm.
This
We
is
know
a
he killed people,
prime
cut people's arms, legs, heads off.
massacred, right?
Mhm.
One life sentence plus 30 years. For me, that's a huge problem. And I don't believe for a minute any of the bullshit stories that they've made up about this guy. Everything I've read of his writings, I've read some of his stuff, I read his tweet. I mean, the guy this is not a drug lord. This is not a kingpin. This is a guy who had an idea that, he thought was going to work. I've known people who dealt drugs. I've known people who were real legitimate fucking criminals who are still walking free. None of that ever happened. I don't believe that guy is what they made him out to be. Double life for 40 plus 40 years. There's he needs to be pardoned. It's insane.
Yeah, I mean, and I don't think you're saying that he didn't deserve to get,
No, he deserved. Okay, you broke a law. It doesn't matter how you
yeah,
feel
there's a
about the
there's a
law.
punishment for that. We're not saying he should have gotten
Right,
off. We're just saying the punishment he got was
right,
so far outside of what it should have been.
right. I mean, I don't believe in seatbelts, right? But I get pulled over and I get a ticket and I pay my seatbelt, right? I broke the law. Doesn't matter if I believe the law, if I like it, but I broke it, right? But I have to pay the fine. Okay, he broke the law. He has to pay. He's been in jail for 10 years. He's been put in solitary confinement for 6 months at a time.
Yeah.
That's brutal shit. For a guy who never harmed anyone. I have a real big passion, and I used to have a film production company, and I've started it up again. And I really would love to write a script from just purely the raw story, who he is as a person and what happened and this injustice that happened. I get emotional about it when I heard him speak at Bitcoin 2021 from the prison. Holy, have you ever heard that?
No. No,
Oh, dude,
I haven't seen his speech.
go on YouTube and just type in Ross Ulbricht Bitcoin 2021 and it
Okay.
should bring that speech up.
I'll
And
put a note in the show notes.
yeah, he spoke, and man, like I got choked up, and from that very minute, I was like, I want to help this guy. I want to help him. I don't believe he had any malice in his heart. I do not believe it, not for a second. And I don't want to see this guy die in prison for spending the rest of his life. And so I would like to write a script. I would only do it with his or his mother's and his family's blessing. Like I'm not going to go out because I know they've made movies about it already, and what I've seen of it, it's garbage. And they make the FBI guy out like he's the good guy, whatever. Um, I think Ross is a good person. I don't know him, but reading his stuff and listening to his speech and listening to his mom and his family talk, I don't think he's that kind of person. And he doesn't deserve this. Even if he is a shitty person, he doesn't deserve double life plus 40 years. I mean, that Ghislaine Maxwell, the ones that were trafficking all these, sex
Or Jeffrey
stuff,
Epstein
20
and
years. You
yeah.
got 20 years. You're sex trafficking people. 20 years? That's it? And this guy's doing double life plus 40. I know, we don't live in a fair world, but there's certain things where I get to, and this is one of them. And I really want to help this guy.
Great.
I really would. And I would love to be able to talk to his family and get their blessing on it. I've written a few scripts and I've had a few things. I produced some stuff, and I would love to get it from a, not the sensationalist perspective, just a perspective of here's a good person in the world who was trying to do something with this new technology. And Bitcoin had a lot to do with why he got sentenced.
Well, and
It was
also,
drugs,
to kind of
drugs, and Bitcoin.
to highlight that, it's also one of the main reasons why a lot of the politicians are talking about Bitcoin as being used for criminal activity and money laundering and everything else. But what people don't understand, because people like Elizabeth Warren and Maxine Waters and Nancy Pelosi don't understand, is that every
Yeah,
transaction on the Bitcoin network is visible to anybody who's operating a node. You can see every transaction in every wallet that stuff goes to. And a couple of years ago, there was, to highlight this point, a couple of years ago, there was a pipeline that was hacked, and the guy said, "I need $50 million, otherwise I'm not going to turn this pipeline back on." And so
right.
they ended up giving him the $50 million, which this guy put on a third party exchange custodied by somebody else. And the FBI has an entire team that is scouring over the Bitcoin blockchain looking for these unscrupulous activities all the time. And
Yeah,
they figured out where this money went, and they figured out who owned this, and they subpoenaed the custodian, and they got all the money back.
yeah.
So
I know. I
for the
know.
government to come out and say that Bitcoin is used in all of these money laundering cases is just factually inaccurate. They
I
just
know. It's
ran the
spoiled
numbers this
garbage.
last year and found that less than 1% of all transactions on the Bitcoin network were considered unjust, or people doing
Right.
wrongful things.
And they just had a hearing. What was it yesterday? Where they asked this guy, "Do you believe Bitcoin is a threat to the security of the United States?" And he said, "Yes."
It's a
What?
yeah, in the sense of the current money system in the U.S. holding its dominance as the world reserve currency. It allows
Right.
for other countries who don't want to deal with the United States. See, before there was, because oil was priced in dollars, it made it impossible for countries that didn't want to deal with the United States not to, because they needed the physical dollars in order to buy the oil. So
Yeah.
now with the technology like Bitcoin, or what China and Russia and some of the other countries are making with this BRICS, the Saudi
Yeah.
Arabia, with this BRICS money or
Yeah.
currency uh, to to recalculate oil in another currency versus the U.S. dollar. So it's a way for
Yeah.
countries to circumvent the current SWIFT system, which is how dollars are sent around the world through the banking system. And so
Yeah. I
they don't
mean,
like that.
when
So
you
Bitcoin is another
weaponize,
technology that can
yeah,
challenge
it,
that.
it takes away, they weaponize the United States dollar.
Yes.
They weaponize. And so Bitcoin makes your weapon not as potent. And so in that case, you say that's a threat to national security, whatever. I my whole politicians, I think 90% of them are psychopaths, because otherwise, how could you actually do what they're doing? How could you go in front of a bunch of, in a hearing and lie? So either you're lying completely, or you're so fucking stupid that you don't know what you're talking about. Either way, I don't want that person representing me in the government, right? So you're either lying or you're so stupid that you don't understand what you're saying. One or the other. And
Yeah.
they come out and they lie and they do all this stuff. They make this sensational stuff. It's money laundering. Well, we all know HSBC laundered money for cartels. What happened? Did anybody go to jail? Is anybody doing double life? No. They got fined a day's
Yeah,
pay.
they make $10 billion, they get fined $1 billion, and they get to keep the other $9 billion. It becomes just like
Right.
a cost of doing business. It's completely
They get
unfair.
fined a day's
In
pay.
the Bitcoin community, I think this is a good point to wrap it up on. But in the Bitcoin
Yeah.
community, we consider Bitcoin freedom money, like you've mentioned a couple of
Yes.
times.
Absolutely.
And it's a way for people who believe in freedom to from anywhere in the world, not just the United States, to have another option versus resorting to violence in order to fight for freedom. We can now
Yeah.
fight for freedom by adopting the Bitcoin network, and
Yeah.
not a single person has to get hurt or die or anything bad. They can either just choose to use the Bitcoin network and live their life that way in a much freer, organized way, or continue to live the current system and deal with all the challenges we've been dealing with for over the
Yeah.
last 75 years, as the U.S. dollar has been the world reserve currency.
And in
So
reality, the rest of the world needs it more than we do.
yeah, yeah. Chris,
Bitcoin.
how do people
Most of the
follow you
rest
on
of the
Twitter?
world needs it.
How do people follow you
Huh?
if they want to talk to you more? How
Oh,
do they
on
follow you?
Twitter, I'm Chris Coffee HF on Twitter.
Okay.
So
Any
yeah,
other
Chris
places they
Coffee
can follow
HF.
you? Any other platforms that you use?
Nah, I'm kind of done with all that shit. Uh,
Okay, great.
I have a few YouTube channels, but I haven't been working on them. I'll get back to it. I'll put it on my Twitter account. But yeah,
Okay, awesome. All right,
just
Chris.
Twitter.
It's been a pleasure having you on the show.
Thanks, Chris.
Thanks for listening to us. If you want to follow Chris, you know how to do that. Feel free once you watch the show to leave some comments in the comments area and like the video and help others find it. Thanks a lot.
That'll be fun. Thanks, Chris.